Welcome back, Dolphins. There they are. There is the team that we know. We were wondering where they went for a week because what we saw in Atlanta was didn't make any sense. And we were wondering where they went. And there they are. So, this game, you know what I think is the most frustrating about the Dolphins in this tenure is you kind of see the potential, like if they got it all together, what they could be, but they can't. It's like taking the emotions out of it because a lot of people will come into this emotionally. In all facets of the game, Miami Dolphins in the first half were outplaying the Baltimore Ravens. They just weren't scoring, but had more offense, had more stops. They just kept beating themselves with turnovers on downs and bad play calling in key situations. I think that's what's the most frustrating thing about this team is you see the potential. You see that it could be something if they got it all together. They got an offensive line. If they were able to call plays right. Putting it together, but too late. And that's been the problem with this team forever is when you first got Mike McDaniel, you got Teron Armstead, you got Connor Williams, and then you kind of just didn't do anything on the offensive line for each year. You would maybe get one guy, and again, that's been the issue with Mike. You have a coach that comes from San Francisco, comes from the Shanahan, and seeing the Shanahan teams, never really seen one that just didn't have offensive linemen. So you have a guy that comes in and, again, big-headed, thinks he's this super genius that, has this play calling that you don't even need offensive line. You're just going to get the ball out and it's just going to be great. And what you see continually is when it works, it's great. When it actually works, Atlanta, the first half. But when they start clicking into what you're trying to do, there is no ability to just play football. And that's kind of the issue. It has to be perfect timing, perfect passes, perfect this. And the problem is you can't always be perfect in football. That's what makes football awesome is that it's imperfect. And sometimes you just have to play football. And that's the problem with, variably, the offense, because the defense came to play. I know there's 28 points on the board. I totally understand that. One was a Taj Washington fumble at the 2-yard line or whatever it was. And, a couple others were just, it's Lamar Jackson. If you're not going to score and the momentum's going to go in the favor of Lamar Jackson, he's going to move the ball down the field. So it's frustrating because you see if they did things right, what this team could be. Because I know people are going to talk about Tua. He threw for 260 yards. For the most part, Tua looked pretty good in most of the game. Just towards the end, when the game was out of reach, that it was what it was. But you see what it could be if Mike and Chris ended up getting offensive linemen every year and just stacking that up, so that in situations like this, you can just play football. You don't have to keep a sixth offensive lineman on the field because they can't block. Doing things like that so you don't have to input Jonah immediately. And the dude's struggling, you see this game. I mean, I can pinpoint, which I'll show you in the film breakdown. There was a run play that literally Aaron Brewer tried to jump over Jonah to block the guy because Jonah fell on the ground again. I don't think I've ever seen a player fall on the ground. It's actually crazy. I have. Liam Eichenberg. We talked all of this stuff, and Jonah is pretty much the same exact thing. It's just unfortunate, and I think that's the reason why you fire Mike McDaniel, because there's a difference between being an offensive coordinator and a head coach. Head coach gets the team together. I just don't think that Mike McDaniel, I think he now understands it. I think now, at this moment, he understands what he should have done as a head coach, who he should have brought in. It shouldn't have been Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill. It should have been offensive linemen and building a culture. And I think now he's realizing the mistake he has. And, the thing is that we're probably going to get James Daniels back and Austin Jackson pretty soon. So most likely this offense is going to play better. Key moments, the offensive line let us down. Larry Borum had a false start on something that probably would have been a touchdown. And it's like, this is where you see the potential. Is if that doesn't happen and you score there, if Taj Washington doesn't fumble, that was a first down, whole momentum has changed. But there's just the constant miscues, and it's because you have players in that should not be playing. That's kind of the issue here. Taj Washington, good practice squad player, but he shouldn't touch the field. He looked like a college player. That was the issue. He looked like a college player because you saw the pass. And if you kept running, you had a first down. You just had to literally run straight. He threw the ball here. If you run straight, you have a first down, you go out of bounds. But when you have players that don't play NFL snaps and shouldn't, what he decides to do is cut it back inside the field towards all three defenders. And he ends up fumbling like a dumbass. I don't know if I could say that, but whatever. Like an idiot. He ends up cutting back into the defenders instead of just running out of bounds and continuing the play. And they score there, and it's unfortunate. But, again, you're moving the ball in the first half. Constant miscues. Not necessarily because Mike is a bad coach, but it's mostly because he put players in positions that they should not be. Larry Borum should not be playing right now. Jonas Savea should not be playing. Cole Strange should not be playing. Taj Washington should not be playing. You've put players in compromising positions, putting them in a position to fail because they shouldn't be playing. They should not be out there. The only players that should be out there realistically is Westbrook-Akide, Jaylen Waddle, Devon Achane. Who else? Yeah, even Greg Dulcich, looked all right. But certain players, they just shouldn't be on the field. And that's why you have to fire Mike McDaniel soon. And honestly, in my opinion, I do think that Anthony Weaver has kind of gained back the respect. I know it says 28-6, but a lot of those were garbage time and turnovers. It's hard to stop them at the one when you fumbled the ball and the defense expects to be on the sideline for a second and they're back out there trying to stop Lamar Jackson. So I think Anthony Weaver has done a pretty decent job turning this around. I think Kenneth Grant is doing better. I think we're stopping the run better. It's, in my honest opinion, the way that I see it, it might even be to the fact that maybe Frank Smith has more respect from the players than Mike does. Because Mike, I don't see it, There was a perfect picture of him on the sideline, and it's like, he's the smallest dude out there, and it's like, how do you follow, because even with Sean McVay and some of those other guys, Sean McVay is yoked, it's like some of these guys are yoked, so you can see that they're, how do you have a guy that, is 120 pounds soaking wet, and you have to follow that guy into battle? It's just not going to happen. So, in my personal opinion, I would even think that they would follow Frank Smith a little better. I think it's time. I think it's time to put everybody out of their misery. We're 2-7. Nothing's going to happen this season, and just for the part of moving forward, I just think Mike McDaniel, he made too many. This game was like the epitome of Mike McDaniel's coaching tenure, where it's just too many mistakes. too many not getting offensive linemen, too many paying too much money for free agents that aren't on your team anymore. Too much of that, and not enough of just good football team building, good football general awareness of what you need as a team. Too much big-headedness of thinking you're creating this ultimate offense and not getting parts to just play offense. Too much of this, and not enough of actually just playing football. And that's what I think happened with this team. That's why you see the potential. Because Mike McDaniel, he's a good offense coordinator. He will get a job. It's just he never put the team in place to be able to execute at a high level. You have too many players, and I know people play with injuries, but you notice these teams, they have the injuries, but they have backups that can come in and fill the role. Whereas with this team, these guys shouldn't be on the field. Like Larry Borum shouldn't be on the field. It's not his fault. He's not talented enough to be a starter, so he shouldn't be there. You shouldn't have someone like Cole Strange that you just picked up 5 weeks ago starting for you. You shouldn't have a rookie, Jonah. You talk about his confidence. You shouldn't have him playing right now. That shouldn't have happened. He's a second-round pick. And his confidence, you talk about confidence and not pulling him out, putting him in to start this season is ruining his confidence. He is not confident at all. He has no clue what he's doing. I see him on the floor more than most Persian rugs, dude. Like, this is why he needs to go. Because it's just too many mistakes. And this game kind of sums it all up. It's just too many mistakes throughout the 4 years of Mike McDaniel, where you have the potential to be something. You saw it in 2023. I mean, heck, you kind of see it in some of these games offensively. You have the potential to get to that point, but you don't have the skill set. You decided to rely on you designing good plays, and this is, kind of prideful and big-headed. You thought so much of yourself that you didn't think you need to get the players in place and the culture in place in order to implement your team. You just thought your stuff would just work. And sometimes it does, but not all the time. And there gets to a certain point where, again, just like the epitome of what you see as a Mike McDaniel head coach is that it's this really nerdy dude. You see, when it comes down to, it's like the guy that talks his way out of everything, but then when it finally comes down to someone that doesn't want to talk, you get beat up. And that's pretty much what happens with this team every time. You do all these different plays, and they're cool and fascinating and all that stuff, but when it comes down to brass taxes and it's time to just play football, you don't know what to do. And it's time to put the weight down and start, putting the gloves on. You don't know what to do. And that's why people constantly call us soft. And that's what you kind of see from the defense. And that's why me transitioning forward with this team, I think Anthony Weaver could be a good interim head coach. And I think at this point, at this very moment, Mike McDaniel can't lead a team. You're looking for a head coach. If I could be honest, I like Chris Shula, but it's not a lot out there, really. Head coaching wise, there's not a lot of head coaches out there. So in my opinion, defense is starting to get it together. You're starting to see a little bit of confidence with the defense. You're starting to see with Jordan Brooks and all that, they're stopping Derrick Henry. For the most part, they stopped Lamar Jackson a lot of this game. Give Anthony Weaver a shot. And if anything, you can have him as the head coach next year, see what he does, and maybe possibly look around for head coaches then, But I think it's time to see how Anthony Weaver leads this team, because this is what is going to happen with Mike McDaniel every time. This is Mike McDaniel's team. This is how it goes. You have all these, talking, gimmicky, nerdy plays that, work for some of the time, but then when it comes down to playing football, you see someone like Anthony Weaver or Frank Smith. You see them on the sideline, they look like men, and Mike just looks like this nerdy dude that when it comes down to physicality, I don't think Mike's ever really been in a fight. He's never touched a football. Like I think he was the ball boy most of his life. And that emulates on the team, because the team, once it comes down to just playing football, they can't do it, because it needs to be gimmicky. It needs to be perfect. It needs to be, mathematically correct. It needs to be 1 + 1 = 2. It needs to be, everything is working in precise motion. And that's what makes Josh Allen great. And that's what makes Sean McVay great. And that's what makes, all the good coaches, Green Bay Packers, all of these guys, that's what makes them so great, is because when it's not perfect, they still figure something out. And that's kind of the problem, is that we never, once we finally get punched in the mouth, there's no figuring it out. We go back to, a lot of the time, you go back to the Baltimore Ravens game back in the day when scored 21 points, but that was just a factor of people not knowing the offense and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle getting wide open. But now, when it comes down to, okay, you're down 14-6, you got to start scoring points. You got to start getting in the end zone. You got to start doing things right and just start playing football. That's when the game starts getting lopsided, because Mike doesn't know how to do that. It needs to be perfect execution, this, that. And that's the thing, like, you can see it on the television screen, that it has to be so perfect. Like, everything has to go right. And I think what a lot of Mike McDaniel's philosophy is not understanding is that you also need the defense to play the way that you want them to for things to work. And when they stop doing what you want them to, you don't know what to do. And that's what I think we're seeing a lot of the time. And that's why I think you need to see what Anthony Weaver has as a head coach, or Frank Smith. One of the two. Mostly Anthony Weaver, because I think the defense is starting to come together. But you're starting to see that if it's not perfect, like the way that Mike designed it in his head, he doesn't know what to do. And it's been like that for 4 years. I think give Anthony Weaver a shot. I just, it sounded like a mean thing or like an emotional thing. I just think we've seen what Mike is about. We've seen how he conducts his things, and we've seen that if the other team doesn't do exactly what you want them to do, you can't play, and it is what it is. Comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Fins up, as always. It is what it is. Praise God, love God. He's great all the time. Love you all. Peace.